Hello and welcome back to the Lack of Interesting Conversation podcast with me, your host, Trey Mendenhall. I just want to thank you once again for joining me today. And if you're new, welcome. I appreciate you coming on board and giving me a listen for the very first time. This is episode 13 of the podcast. So if you like what you hear or want to get to know what else we cover here on the Lack podcast, just go back and listen to our previous 12 episodes here, and I would really appreciate it. Also, just make sure you give a rating if you can on these episodes on for the podcast. Make sure you follow us. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, which is the home of the exclusive home anyway of the video version of the podcast. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for all those who watch on there. Make sure you like us on there as well. Like the follow the YouTube channel, which is the Lack of Interesting Conversation. Actually, at this Trey Mendenhall on that on the YouTube. You can just subscribe to us. Also, hit that notification bell to know if you want to know when we upload. Try to upload at least a short or two every week, and obviously every Wednesday we come out with a new episode. So I'd like appreciate it if you just go check us out over there as well. And we are also available on every podcasting platform you can find. Also, we are on the Facebook as well, but you can also follow me uh, on Instagram and TikTok at Trey TREA underscore Mendenhall MENDENHALL on those platforms as well. And just released the previews for the podcast. Um, which I did over on YouTube and TikTok this week. A little preview about what we'll be talking about as here in March has we're about halfway through. So this is the official month of March Madness. Obviously, it's in the title. So the college basketball tournaments are getting ready to be underway here, and this is what we'll be talking about today on the podcast here. I would just also on the ESPN Fantasy app, which is what is the app that we that I personally use, like for fantasy football and obviously for the tournament for the bracket challenge here. Uh, so I create on there on the ESPN app. I created a group there, as you can create groups and stuff on there. Like Sports Center has a group, College Game Day, First Take, Get Up, NBA Today, several others have groups you can join there on and put your brackets in for fun, see who can come out on top. So this year did a little something different here and created one for the podcast, which is the Lack of Interesting Conversation Tournament Challenge. So if you can just search us up on there, or I will, and if you want to join there, also I will make sure to link the group in the description of this episode here. I will make sure that you have a way to join if you so choose to do so. So let's go ahead and let the go over my bracket and let the madness begin. All right, I'm going to start out. I will tell you all the number one seeds here. Duke is number one in the East region there. Then I know Michigan's number one in the Midwest. Arizona is number one in the West. And then in the South region, you have Florida. They're the number one seed. So, but we'll start here at the top here in the East region. The number one seed Duke Blue Devils take on Siena. Obviously, Duke, big name brand, just like the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL, the New York Yankees, and Major League Baseball. Um, I guess, or the Lakers in the National Basketball Association. Always get the big name target on their back. A lot of people don't like them. They take on the number 16 seed Siena. I have Duke moving on here. Um, and going to the round of 32 there. And then the number 2 seeded in this region is uh, Yukon. I have them defeating Furman, the number 15 seed here. Then the number 3 seed in this region is the Michigan State Spartans. I have them defeating North Dakota State and DSU. Ironically, their football program is getting ready to move up to the big boy level. I know that program was pretty dominant for years at the FCS level. They didn't win a championship every year, but they always were in it. But I do not have them being Michigan State with Tom Izzo and all that. I don't. He's been there for years and knows how to get the best out of his players. With coaching so long. Then the number 4 seed Kansas Jayhawks, I have them moving on, being California Baptist. Then the number 5 seed St. John's, I have them beating Northern Iowa. Ironically, is the alma mater of Hall of Famer quarterback Kurt Warner, former St. Louis when they were in the Rams before they moved back to LA. You were in St. Louis, brought them their very first Super Bowl there in St. Louis, and then obviously later in his revived his career there in Arizona. Then the number 6 seeded Louisville Cardinals, which ironically St. John's has their former head coach and Rick Paterno take on South Florida, number 11 seed South Florida Bulls. In this one, this is the upset I have of this region. I have South Florida moving on. Usually during these tournaments, there's usually upset or 2 or 3 or 4 or 50 in this tournament. So um, that's one I called. Then the number 7 UCLA Bruins, massive history, basketball history from a long time ago, taking on number 10 seed UCF, Central Florida. Have Central Florida moving on there, and then the 8-9 seed, I have Ohio State beating TCU. My wife's alma mater, Ohio State. She'd probably be upset if I didn't pick Ohio State. But then as we go into the East region here, I'm gonna just go through each region, then go to my Final Four, and we'll have my Final Four teams after I'm done with the last region here. I have Duke taking on Ohio State here. I have Duke beating Ohio State, uh, advancing to a Sweet 16. Then I have UConn, the number 2 seed UConn Huskies moving on, beating UCF. Um, then Michigan State coming over, my upset of this bracket, of this region anyway. Uh, South Florida, then St. John's moving on past Kansas. Then my Sweet 16 in the East region consists of Duke taking on St. John's, then UConn taking on Michigan State. Have Duke and UConn both moving on, and then in the Elite Eight, the finals of the East region before the advancing to the Final Four. I do, even though UConn, their coaching staff, they've been won this whole thing a couple times over the last few years. I have Duke advancing to the Final Four, which is probably their first Final Four in a long time. Then we go to the South region here. I got the number 1 seeded Florida Gators. Boo! Just kidding. Even no, I'm a Tennessee fan. Florida, not a big fan. Anyway, but they're taking on the number 16 seed, whether that's a playing game, PV or Lehigh or Providence. Maybe I could be wrong about that, but I have Florida moving on. Then number 2 seed in the South region is Houston. They take on Idaho. I have Houston moving on. That program has obviously had their day in the sun in previous years ago. Then I have the number 3 seeded Illinois Fighting Illini beating Penn, the Ivy League school, which is pretty cool. Ivy League schools usually don't show up in these tournaments very often. It's pretty cool that they're there. That's awesome. But I do not have them moving on. The number 4 seeded Nebraska Cornhuskers, I have them we're not taking on. I have them beating Troy, which is the alma mater of former Cowboys and Broncos DN / outside linebacker DeMarcus Ware. I have them moving on to the round of 32. And the fifth seed is Vanderbilt. It's a big rival for Tennessee, obviously, since I'm a Tennessee Volunteer fan. Taking on number 12, McNeese. Vandy moving on there. Then the number 6 seed, North Carolina Tar Heels, taking on the number 11 seed, VCU, who had a run years ago. I do remember them being one of the Cinderella teams, as there's always seems to be one in this tournament. But this is my upset of the South region here. I got VCU moving on, and then the number 7 St. Mary's taking on number 10 seeded Texas A&M. I have an A&M moving on here. Then the 8-9 seed, probably the closest matchup of the brackets of each region. These teams probably pretty close. Clemson versus Iowa. The Clemson Tigers are the 8 seed. Iowa is 9. But I have Clemson moving on here to the round of 32 to take on the number 1 seeded Florida Gators. I have Florida moving on here. Then we got the in-state battle here of Houston versus A&M. I have Houston moving on. Then the number 3 seeded Illinois taking on the 11 seeds VCU. Sorry, VCU. You know, I talked about your Cinderella run a few years ago. I do not have you going on another one. You won your first round game in my bracket, but I have you losing Illinois. Then I have Vanderbilt. Yes, Vanderbilt moving on past Nebraska. So then we go to the Sweet 16 here. Obviously, I got Florida taking on Vanderbilt and Houston taking on Illinois. So, but then this is probably might be the biggest upset in terms of all the teams I have at this point. I have Vanderbilt moving on. I have them beating Florida. Obviously, both SEC foes. So, same conference teams. They know each other just like in football or any other sport. They know you the best compared to the rest of these teams, even though you don't have to certainly know a team very well to beat them. But I think this might give a Vanderbilt the advantage, as if they make it this far, it might be their best overall sports uh, season in the history of the school. Then I have Illinois beating Houston, but they advance to the Elite Eight, which is the final of the South region. So Vanderbilt versus Illinois, Big Ten versus SEC, as this is a pretty big thing when it comes to football anyway. But I have the SEC overcoming here, the Big Ten, even though I do live in Big Ten country. I have Vanderbilt moving on to take on Duke in the Final Four. So then we go to the West region here. The number 1 seed Arizona Wildcats taking on the number 16 seed Long Island, have Arizona moving on here. Then the number 2 seeded Purdue Boilermakers. My mother-in-law went there. Had them defeating Queens, the number 15 seed. Had them moving on. I probably wouldn't be able to live that down if I didn't pick them, but I do. Then you got the number 3 seeded Gonzaga Bulldogs. If you've been around college football for any period of time, you know their history, how good they've been, and how good they are. As I know, next year they're moving up to the Pac-12 in all sports. I believe they do not have a football program, which doesn't count towards the 8 teams needed to be an FBS program conference, the Pac-12, and I know they got it. I think with Utah State ended up being the last team, the team that put them over the hump to be an FBS conference. They take on the number 14 Kennesaw State, who themselves just recently moved up to the FBS level on football. I have Gonzaga winning there and advancing. Then the number 4 seeded Arkansas Razorbacks taking on the number 13 seed Hawaii. Nice to see Hawaii there. I know they're so far out there; they don't get much love, and I know a lot of. I'm sure most of their games are on super late at night and may be hard to find. But I do not have them winning. I have Arkansas winning that and advancing. Then the number 5 seeded Wisconsin Badgers taking on the number 12 High Point. I have Wisconsin moving on there. Then the number 6 seeded BYU Cougars take on the number 11 seed. This is another playing game for the 11th seed in the West region. You either got Texas or NC State. It doesn't matter who it is. I think BYU advances regardless. Then the number 7 seed Miami the U baby takes on the number 10 seeded Missouri Tigers. I have the U advancing, as I'm sure that program's pretty hungry coming off of their football program's appearance in the national championship game. Obviously, I know the U is notorious, especially with here in the last 50 years of being a football school with all their success in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. It's nice. I'm sure they feel pretty good about their football program being where it is, and now they want to continue that momentum in terms of trying to be an everything school with their basketball program advancing, maybe and trying to win this whole tournament here. I have them moving on. Then the number 8 seed Villanova taking on the Utah State. And here I have Utah State moving on to the round of 32 to take on the number 1 seed Arizona Wildcats. And here I have Arizona moving on. Then the I know I kind of built them up previously. They take on the number 2 seed Purdue Boilermakers. I have Purdue moving on. Then the number 3 seed Gonzaga, I have them moving on past BYU, and Wisconsin moving on past Arkansas to play Arizona in the Sweet 16. I have Arizona moving on. I have all chalk basically in this part of the region in the West here. I have Purdue moving on, beating Gonzaga, with Purdue moving on to the Final Four, beating Arizona. Then we go to the final region of my bracket here in the Midwest. They were number 1 seeded Michigan Wolverines here take on another playing team, whether that UMBC or HOW for this be the 16 seed. Whoever wins that, I believe a lot of these playing games probably are on Tuesday, which is the day I'm actually recording here. But I have Michigan. I think they'll be hungry, ready to make a point after losing the Big Ten title game to Purdue, who we just talked about. It'll be interesting to see how they come out and play. I think they'll do well. Well, if they don't, we'll know that they're probably still looking back at that Big Ten championship game. But hopefully, the lights of fire up under them, so they are somewhat embarrassed. Then you got the number 2 seed Iowa State Cyclones versus the number 15 seed Tennessee State. It's to be honest, to see any Iowa State team, especially with how bad their football program's been throughout their history. I know recently they've had some success, but that doesn't mean you don't have success in other sport programs in their school has. It's nice to see them actually do so well here. I'm sure their conference, the Big 12, is pretty excited that they got the number 2 seed here, and I have them beating Tennessee State. Then you got the number 3 Virginia taking on Wright State, another Ohio team, a small Ohio team. I have Virginia advancing here. Then the number 4 seed Alabama Crimson Tide, probably outside Vanderbilt, Tennessee's number 1 rival. The dislike between both fan bases is pretty high, but I have Alabama moving on here. Then you got the number 5 seed Texas Tech Red Raiders taking on Akron of Ohio. This is probably the biggest upset of the tournament, in my opinion. I have Akron beating Texas Tech here. Pretty crazy. Then The number 6 seeded Tennessee Volunteers, who have been up and down all year, when showing flashes of how good they can be, then going stink up the room and lose horribly to teams and who they just lost to Vanderbilt in the SEC tournament. They've had some pretty bad losses this year. They will take on the number 11 seed, whether that be SMU or the Miami of Ohio, who just lost their very first game in the MAC tournament. We'll see who comes out on top with that playing game. But I have the Volunteers moving on here. How could I not? Then the number 7 seed Kentucky Wildcats take on the number 10 seed St. Clair. Then I have St. Clair moving on from Kentucky, which happens to be Tennessee's other rival as well. Then the 8-9 seed Georgia, again number 8 seed Georgia Bulldogs versus the number 9 seed St. Louis. I have St. Louis winning here to take on the number 1 seeded Michigan Wolverines, and have Michigan moving on. I think they'll be hungry enough. I think that loss to Purdue lit a fire up under them, and I think they move on. And then I have the number 2 seed Iowa State Cyclones taking on St. Clara. I have Iowa moving on. Then they got Virginia versus Tennessee. This is where, even though Tennessee is my favorite program in college, I do not have them moving on here. I think that catches up to them. They'll probably come out and play like crazy and maybe get out to a big lead, then find a way to choke and let Virginia back in the game and win it. Heck, Tennessee could even lose the first round game for just the way they play this year. Then Alabama versus Akron as the last matchup to go here in around the 32 in the Midwest. Then I have Alabama advancing to Michigan. I know, speaking of Alabama, Michigan, Alabama, well, not Alabama, but Michigan here, a few years ago became the first program in college football history to beat Alabama twice in 1 year. Crazy. In this one, obviously another big matchup here. If this ends up happening, I got a couple of buddies, both are a Michigan fan and an Alabama fan. So one of them will be happy as the result of this game. But I have Michigan coming out on top here. Then I have Virginia beating Iowa State. That may be a mistake, but I don't know. This entire bracket may be a mistake. It'd probably be busted after one day. But sometimes that's how it goes. Especially if you're just doing this for fun. Then I have there in the Elite Eight, basically the finals for the Midwest region, Michigan taking on Virginia, with having Michigan advancing. So in the Final Four, the West and Midwest, it's no Big Ten matchup. Purdue versus Michigan. And in the East-South region, you have Vanderbilt versus Duke. Okay. This may be wrong, but I have Duke beating Vanderbilt and Michigan beating Purdue. Sorry, June, but I do. I have both number 1 seeds from 2 of the regions advancing to the Final Four, and that's probably a mistake. Then advancing to the national championship. Then you got Michigan versus Duke, which is a rematch of one of the final championship games in the 90s, early 90s, when you had the Fab Five at Michigan. Chris Webber, Jalen Rose. I'm blanking on the other names, but you had Christian Leitner there at Duke hitting a game-winning shot. So this will be, I think it'll be a good matchup anyway. But this time, I have the Wolverines. Yes, the Wolverines, the Michigan Wolverines, baby, coming out on top here and winning it all in my bracket. So anyway, just let me know what you think of the bracket here. If you think it sucks, tell me, hey, your bracket sucks and you don't know how to pick anything. I don't care. But don't forget to also in your bracket into the group there for the podcast. I just love. Honestly, I would just love it. I got my wife and our boys involved in putting in a bracket. Would just love to have more of you guys just join in just for fun. If you cannot find it for some reason when you type in the name for the bracket on the ESPN Fantasy website or the ESPN Fantasy app. I will make sure I will leave a link to the group below in the description of this podcast. But anyway, before we go, I just want you to remember that Jesus does love you. He went to the cross for you, and he died in your place, so you didn't have to experience the pain and suffering that we did deserve as sinners. Because of Jesus doing that, he tore the veil in half. So through him, we have a mediator to God, to our Father, and that we may be saved and be adopted back into God's family. Sin made that not possible, but Jesus made the way. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And no one gets to the Father except through him. So anyway, I just want to thank you again for joining me again here today on the Lack of an Arresting Conversation podcast.